morning. Actually, Erin and I are presenting later on today. You sent I'm almost done with the PowerPoint. So, good morning. Let's see what slides we have for you today. Again, how many of you in the room are the student data manager? Okay. Well, maybe about 25% last time. It was about a third. So, I want to give you their to-do list if you haven't already. Maybe let's take a poll in the room. How many of you have looked at the Student Data Protection Act? Oh, more of you than raise your hand for the Student Data Manager. Thank you. How many have added yourselves to the distribution list to get updates on data privacy? Not as good. Not as good. I would do that. Add yourself to the list. You will not be inundated with emails. I can send about one, maybe two a month. But the emails have all the updated model documents that I'm developing. We already have an LEA IT security model document. We have the directory information model document. By the end of this week, we'll have 2 other model documents you should be aware of. I'll be talking about the agendas for upcoming webinars. So add yourself to the list if you have anything to do with data privacy. So you guys don't handle data at all, do you? No. Okay. And then visit the website. Look at some of those resources. The website here at USB will be changed, and so, but all of the resources will remain. And then I suggest going to PTAC. They came out here in December. We're asking them to come back again for a conference in October that will be hosting a day-long conference. We'll give you more details once I know them. Let's go next slide. So here are the agendas for the webinars just presented. We decided to record them for your viewing pleasure. Here you see all of the topics. We'll be talking about the metadata dictionary on April 5th, and we'll be talking about data expungement or records retention, I guess you could call that. We'll be talking about that as well. So these model documents, ones that I should mention to you are some standard that were approved by the board in January. These are terms and conditions that you could use to attach to a vendor contract to ensure student data privacy. We're including this into all of our contracts that have any kind of data sharing. It's a little confusing because the first couple of pages refers to attachment B, and attachment B is actually a list of the data elements you're going to share, and so that's blank because we don't know. But we've gotten a number of questions that are a little confusing on that. Again, the security policy, we have that done, and then the directory information coming out by the end or by the next webinar, probably a little sooner, are these other model documents. Data breach, policy, record of parent notification of a student threat, and then prohibited activities without prior consent. And that is all. If you have any questions, please email me. Put yourselves on the distribution list if you remember anything. Okay.
Thank you and good morning. I've left a copy of this in the back of the room if you want to pick these up. I think Tori will also be emailing these out. Okay, and email them out. So the 2 documents are, excuse me, had some nuts this morning. Making sense of growth targets, and growth variations. It is a Word document. It kind of explains what we'll be going over today. The second one is just a Word document. It's a SQL. This is a recommendation. If you want to go into your own SERP and pull out your, we're calling them AGPs, it's your target growth. If you want to know how to pull them out, this is the SQL that will do that for you. I'll explain those as we go along. Next slide. I'll go through my presentation fairly quickly. Basically, when we look at student growth, I mean, we have the SGPs, we have the MGPs, and really what the SGP with now these targets pulls growth back, if you will, halfway to your status or your proficiency. It's kind of an in-between mark between the two. But really, as we have been looking at growth, we do know low performers can grow high. So if you have schools that are struggling on their accountability, or a principal comes to you and says, hey, how can I help my growth? Can we do growth? Absolutely. We're seeing that this is, in any school where they really start focusing and they start moving, we start seeing high growth. It is, the data are coming and verifying that, yes, growth is having a huge impact, and it will have an impact on their scores. Next slide. So let's talk about the targets. This is one I want to guess. So targets, AGPs, student growth targets, however you want to call it, is another part of the SGP package that we run. What happens inside of there is it's dependent on, one, their prior year proficiency. Where were they? If they were below proficient or approaching proficient, so a 1 or a 2, they get one growth target, which is simply, how do I catch up?
Aaron,
Yes.
could you stand closer to Emily's computer?
You
So
don't.
they can hear the audio through that. Right?
I can hear him just fine on mine.
Someone's, sorry.
Yeah,
So I move, I'll stay here. Anyway, so a 1 and 2 is it's a catch-up, meaning within 3 years, what growth is required for this individual to become proficient? It's very straightforward. If you are a proficient student or advanced proficient student, you get 2 of these target scores. The first one is called stay up. The stay up is simply staying above the proficiency line. What does it take? It's a less aggressive growth score. So for example, if I'm a 4 and I have an SGP of, we'll say 80, I'm already well above the proficiency line. This target right here might be 5, for example, meaning they can dip down into the proficiency level or a 3 and still remain proficient or still stay up. The second part then is this move up or step up.
Stay up in one place and step up in
But anyway, it's in the code. Basically, sorry, step up, move up. As we start looking at these, basically what it's saying is, if I'm a 3, what is it going to take to move up to a 4? If I'm a 4, what does it take to stay at a 4? These are more aggressive or higher range targets for the students. So understand that your advanced students get 2, your below proficients get 1 target. Go ahead and look at that screen. Oh, am I supposed to do it?
No, I can.
Okay, thank you. So this is the sequel of how to pull it out of your cert if you want to get access to it. I put this in the slide. I've also given a Word document with the SQL statement inside of it. This should work for you, no problem, unless you go in and you transform your cert tables into your own database, then you give it to your IT director or whoever does that. And they can figure it out. Okay.
I don't know.
Someone can't hear me. We've looked at a number, and we don't have the definitive answer of how to display all these. But we've been trying to say, how can you take this information and start displaying it to the teachers, to the principals, to your district administrators and such. And we've looked at a number of approaches. The first approach is we take your average growth score, your MGP, and then we find the average AGP, and then we just subtract the two. This is a model that a number of states have been using right now, and so you just get a number between, basically it's a negative and a positive saying where are we at. Another way to do this is following more closely to what the school grade says is simply, did I make my target or no? The school growth currently uses 40 as the SGP as the cutoff. This one would use an AGP target instead. The last way, and this is the displays we did, where we actually take a score and then convert it into a Z-score, so it gives you a context of what does this mean against a state number or a more stable number. Let's move forward to the slides. We presented these yesterday. I'm doing it now, sorry. This is your MGP, and we just broke this down by teachers so you can see what it looked like. We have an example of a high-growth school on the left-hand side and a low-growth school on the right-hand side. Where we just said this teacher has an 82 MGP, this teacher down here has a 51, again a low growth of 57, down to 15. These are just, again, examples of displays that we're presenting. This one then is how would you display, or a possible display. We say we could take it and say, show me the difference, just MGP minus the AGP. Then we can say, give me my percent over all of those who made the growth. And then this one is the Z-score. Again, if you're looking at a Z-score, you have to say, all right, this isn't, now talk about standard deviation, how far above or below are you within those bounds. Moving forward, we can also take a look and say, I want to look at just my advanced students or my proficient and advanced proficient students. What is their difference? Again, this is just kind of showing those same teachers and what that report would look like if we did it this way. We said, no, let's just look at a below proficient, what kind of growth are we seeing inside of there? Did jump too many? Yes. Z-score, and then we could say, we could display this by teacher. We could say, show me all growth, show me the advanced growth, show me the below proficient growth. We had a discussion about this yesterday with the APAC group. They don't like anything, but that's okay. Sometimes they're smiling because they're there. And so they said, hey, we want to see it differently. So yesterday after that meeting, I went out and I said, okay, let's try to remodel this in a little different approach. So I put SGP here, so that's from 0 to 100, and then I took a difference score. Note that I just put the target growth score, which is this from 50 up to 100, and displayed it. This is just one approach, and then the colors are by the proficiency levels. And so just breaking it into what would this look like. So we're looking at proficiency number 1, how they lay out, and you can hover over it and say, okay, this student, for example, this student right here has an SGP of 80. Their growth target was 88. That means they had a difference of 8 inside of there. What is this telling you? They almost made that girl score. Moving on to the next one. This is level 2s. And it's been interesting. Now, I've only been looking at Davis School District since last night and this morning. And Logan and I were discovering basically for Davis modeling, and they're fairly large, so if we assume this model would hold true throughout the state, the 2s are making the most growth, or they're making their targets more than anyone else. I couldn't have said that 2 days ago unless I started digging into this like we've been doing. But again, we're looking at the 2s here. We're finding that the red bands, or the 2s, are more on the left-hand side saying they are making their targets. Moving forward, these are our 3s. They're kind of right in the middle. Half are making, half are not. And then our 4s, which tend to be more on the left-hand side. So this is just another presentation, another way that we've been showing it. I also then flipped it where we could say, look at this at a slant where we took the difference and put it down on the bottom. And so we can see it slanted. I don't know what works best yet on displaying this information. Logan doesn't know either, but he's really close. We've actually been looking at a couple models this morning, just kind of playing with it in the software that I have. But what I'm sharing with you is, one, we're trying to get to a place where, as we start integrating the AGP or these growth targets, how do we make sense of them? It's complex. It's going to take a little bit of training and some thought behind this. If you have time, I'd recommend you go look at your own data and kind of try to analyze and say, what am I getting out of here? And if you have feedback, please give me a call.
So, like Aaron said, he left the SQL for you, but you can also, this is in your SURF file. So what we're looking for, and that these guys have just started to play with, are some ways that we can display adequate growth percentiles and student growth percentiles and student targets and what makes sense for people moving forward. So, I mean, we're absolutely not doing anything yet, but we're starting to think about it. And so we would like to get ideas from the field as well. If you get in there and play, you've got the data. So, and they do have their, do they have their targets in there now, right now? We already do.
About
2 years, okay.
Aaron, we talked a while ago about.
We talked a while ago.
We talked a while ago about changing the AGP to a skilled score too. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the plan is to do that. We just haven't yet.
So we're currently working with the Center for Assessment, and they're going to be actually being able to produce for us an actual scale score for the growth target. And those are going to be called student growth targets. And that's actually in the accountability legislation that I'll talk about just a little bit later.
And by the way, the differences are the same thing. One is just an SG, it's a range between 1 and 99, and the other will be a target score. The data will play out the same. Just so you know, the SQL, what it's going to produce, don't just go and run it and say, hey, run this, and they're like, hey, this is student level. I'm just talking privacy here for a second. This is exactly what you get on the data gateway if you want to look at a teacher level report. So it's going to pump out first name, last name, their SSID, the teacher ID, which is their Cactus ID, the test name, the proficiency score, the scale score, the prior year proficiency, their AGP 1, AGP 2 is what I call them there, or the target 1, target 2. Just so you're aware that that's what will happen. Again, the best approach right now is get it down to the student level and start seeing what makes sense there. We know that that's the best discussion is at the student level, but we also know when you start looking for trends and good teaching examples, how do we roll this up and really say, oh, okay, this starts making sense. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. You know, one of the things we talked about yesterday, too, in our PAC meeting was that we don't want administrators to misuse the data. So by ranking, I mean, there's a lot of volatility in these scores. And, of course, a lot of it's dependent on the end size and how do you have a, you know, perhaps a confidence interval around some of these things. So we'll be thinking about that as we move forward. This morning I asked, Logan has a really nifty thing that he's done with the Apple tests. And so we know that Apple this was the first year that we did a statewide administration of the Apple test, which is the dual immersion language test. And so Logan had a really nifty way in how he manipulated data for display. And so I asked him if he wouldn't mind sharing this morning what he's done in Davis and then be able to share it with you so that you can have use of this little tool.
Okay, awesome. It's not super duper fancy or anything like that, but it's just in response to I just gotta say, I was the one at APAC yesterday that gave Aaron a hard time. And so the fact that he looked at Davis history data all night last night, I guess it's just good enough for me. I don't know what's going on with that. He's so good to be responsive and help us out. So one of the things that my superintendent has asked us to do, I'll just use space bar, I'm fine, I only have like 2 slides, is to go and he wanted me to do this big program evaluation on our immersion programs because there's 2 big questions. Number 1, are our kids learning the language? And number 2, are they falling behind in their regular core instructional learning? And so the second piece was pretty complex and district specific, but the bottom line on that second piece is we found in our district that there's like a net 0 difference in the expected outcomes on the SAGE scores in language, math, and science when we did a predictive model. So at least for us, we can say with confidence that our immersion kids are not falling behind in language, math, and science, nor are the non-immersion kids in immersion schools falling behind because of having an immersion school in their school. So, or immersion program in their school. So we have, just wanted to show you this real quick. This is how I feel when I first looked at Apple data. My people said, what does the Apple data say? And I looked at the Apple data and I was like, I have no idea. I don't even know what I6 is. So we're all kind of learning this thing together. But the bottom line is this. I talked to Greg Roberts a little bit, and he identified these thresholds that are the outcomes on the Apple test, which is the end of year expected proficiency level for the Apple test in all these different areas. And you'll remember that we only gave statewide, we only gave like 4 through 8, I think, in the speaking test. And these are end of year, but we gave the thing in October. So I pushed them a little bit on they're different for Chinese. I just have them there for your information. Those are end of year proficiency. So I asked him, what's the expectation for October when we gave the thing? Where should these kids be now when they take it? And this is what he turned back. So the Apple test generates these novice, below novice, intermediate, and advanced scores that have different numeric levels. So you'll go novice 1, 2, 3, 4, intermediate 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5, and then advanced. So this is where our French, German, Portuguese, and Spanish kids should be by grade in October when they take the thing, and our Chinese kids are expected to be 1 or 2 levels behind their development a little bit slower. So I took this, and then I got the data download from Davis and a couple other districts that shared data with me, and I built this model. And then Joellen was like, hey, come do this for AD meeting. So I got the whole state. So what we have right now that I'm sharing with you today is basically there's a spreadsheet that was sent through the AD email list for you to look at. We'll pull that up here in just a second. But we got a list of every test and what grade they were in and what language it was and what school they were in and what district they were in and what their score was. And then I applied those criterion for whether they were at their benchmark or not, kind of get an air quoting here, a proficiency, because it's not really proficiency, it's October, right? But kind of, is this kid on the, and kind of like, this kid is like, if I'm a 4th grader, then my immersion language acquisition hasn't been successful to the point of October in my 4th grade year, October in my 5th grade, and so on. And then we've got this little spreadsheet that I've created that we'll go to in just a second that I'll show you how to play with a little bit. Just remember a few things though as you're looking at this to make comparisons. Because the bottom line is I wanted to look and see, are our Chinese programs doing as well as your Chinese programs? Are our Portuguese programs doing as well as yours? And so on. So remember that the programs aren't always the same. Some schools have a 2-way immersion program, which is native Spanish speakers in the Spanish immersion program. Some schools have a full magnet school approach, and some schools have just a couple of classes in the school by grade level. So as you look at comparisons, make sure that you're looking at schools that you know have programs that are similar to yours. Otherwise, you make maybe some false conclusions about whether we're happy or sad about where we are on our language acquisition. And the last thing to remember is this is a proficiency measure, and proficiency measures are heavily influenced by demographic risk. So if you have a school that's really high demographic risk, and they have lower scores on this test than the other, we probably would have expected that just based on demographics and stuff. So let's open that spreadsheet now, because I think that's my last slide. Oh yeah, I'm just giving you, the one that you're receiving is just a copy, and it's just a pivot table in Excel, for those of you that are familiar with those. You're looking at Davis School District summary, but I'll show you how to use the pivot table and get your own district or pull in other schools for comparison or whatever you want.
While she's pulling that up, I was just going to say,
That's it right there.
depending on funding.
Oh, can you make these columns a little bit wider so that these numbers will show up?
Funding last year, and that's why we did the 4th through the 8th, that whole super test. But it depends on how everything comes out, the legislative session, line items and everything. We should have, we don't know. So we will keep you informed on what we can do for you for Apple next year.
Okay. Joellen just said, for those of you that are online, that the state is still deciding what they're doing for future implementation of Apple. They'll keep us
Well, at
posted.
least 4A, but we may go broader.
Okay, so they're at least going to continue to do 4A, but they may expand that. Did I do that right? Okay. All right, here's your simple pivot table. There's a hidden sheet down here with all the data. The data is de-identified. It was given to me de-identified, which is the most appropriate, meaning there's no way to tell which kid's which. I did remove a few students from the data set that were like 1B, 2B, like the only 8th grader out of school that took the thing, and because that could potentially be identifiable. So I removed every student that was in a group size that was less than 10. So what you're looking at is basically all the data except for those 5 or 6 kids in the state. So if you want to see the data itself, you can come down here and unhide the sheet. And this pivot table is built for districts. Oh, now I'm doing something weird. Oh dear. Can you drive for me?
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to use a PC. Just go over to the very, there we go. See that district filter? Now you can manipulate this just like you manipulate a pivot table. You can just bring the language up and run it just for a certain language or bring your schools in or something. So let's say I want to compare my Spanish programs against Alpine's and, so click Alpine there and go down and click, I don't know, whatever, do Canyons, doesn't matter. Now I don't know for sure if Canyon's Spanish programs are just like our Spanish programs or not. Dave just stood up because he wants to see what's going on.
Defend Alpine.
Click, so now here's all the Chinese programs in those districts, right? So can you scroll down just a little bit? Emily, thank you so much for writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that in some of these schools, I have certain grades and some I don't, right? But I can look and see that Muir is mine and Lone Peak is yours, right, Dave?
No.
Lone Peak's not yours?
Lone Peak higher, but we don't have.
Lone Peak might be Canyons then, okay? So they have 100% language acquisition, and we have 92 in first grade or in 4th grade and 100 in 5th grade. So I can kind of see by grade level, by schools. These are language acquisition where it should be the shaded bars at the top, like in any pivot table, is going to be a summary of everything below it. And at the very bottom is a summary of everything below it. So it's a simple pivot table in Excel. It's not super fancy, but the bottom line is there are these thresholds that our students should be attaining to a certain level. All that's programmed in here in the data set, and the pivot table will just kind of generate a proficiency on Apple that we can at least start with until we can understand what the data really is telling us. So if you have immersion people that want to know, or superintendencies that want to know, or if you're really curious about it, you can take a look and do comparisons and you put it pivot table if you want. That's it.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you so much.
That's going to be really useful. We appreciate that. Okay. So get in there and play with it, and then call Logan. He didn't give, oh.
You guys know my number. You don't know my number?
And his number is
402-5303. 801-402-5303.
801
402
402
5303.
5303. He gets the prize for fast talker.
Okay.
No, you're fine.
Sorry.
Just your number. Okay. So let's see. Where's Sydney? Are you going to do WIDA? Yes. Okay. So we're going to move on to WIDA now. Let's get down to the school turnaround. Rich is going to come and talk about school turnaround. And if he doesn't show, I will try to talk about it, but I don't know if people are thinking. But we'll go ahead and skip to WIDA right now. Okay. So we've finished our window. Yeah, thank you. Our testing window finished last Friday, the 10th. Just a reminder that all of the materials need to be shipped back by the 24th. So if you haven't started shipping them back yet, make sure you contact the UPS. Follow those directions that are in the test coordinator manual about shipping back the materials by the 24th. And then the data validation will be April 10th through the 14th. Similar to last year, I know especially our bigger districts, there was the issue with having to go in individually with student by student, and then they ended up getting the CSV file where you can do it with the file. The same thing will happen this year. The large districts will get those CSV files, so you can use those instead of having to go in student by student. And it's the same as last year. The only thing you're editing is the accommodations or the do not score codes. Those are the only things that you can edit with this data validation. Questions about that? Okay. Thank you. Next one. Another reminder about the standards. We've talked about this in the last couple of meetings, but I just want to make sure everyone is aware. We did change their standards. They had a standard setting last year. You can go to their website to find out more information. This line at the very bottom, the WIDA.us dash, not dash, hyphen, backslash, proficiency is the word I'm looking for. That's where you can go to find out information about the change for the scores.
Next. And next. There's a couple of.
So there are still scale scores, that didn't change, but what changed was the meaning of the scale score. So can we take one more time? And one more time after that. So with what was a 5 on the top line, with the Access 1.0, the old standard scores, what was a 5, which was our exit point, is now closer to a 4.2 with the new standard. What is now a 5 is closer to what was almost a 6 previously. So the meaning of this is we'll have fewer students exiting from EL status. But when they do exit, when we've looked at comparison data between students who are scoring what is now a 5 and their content test, so like the stage test scores, those students were receiving 3s and 4s on their state content test, so proficiency in the language arts area. So really, those students are really prepared for English learning in the content areas. Okay, so this graph just shows the scores for grades based on the 1.0 standards and compared that with the 2.0 standards. So what they did was took the data that we had from last year and ran it with what we had last year with the original scale scores, and then ran that data against what would be the new scale scores to show what would happen if they had been run against those numbers. So you can see in proficiency level 1, 2, 3, those are the levels, the different colors, and then these are the grades. So in grade 1, with proficiency with the standard 1.0, the blues and greens are where we would have exited, the levels 5 and 6. So first grade, not a whole lot of changes. A few students exited and not as many would have exited. But really, if you can see in third grade, there were a ton of students that exited last year, these blues and greens, where if we had had a new standard last year, very few of those students would have exited. So it does start to make a difference.
Do they go in effect this coming year?
Yes, so this year, as they're scoring, we just finished the testing. These new tests that we just finished, we'll be using the standard 2.0 scores.
Have you
So,
given,
oh yes,
have you given that same information
to the
to
ALS
three
director.
ALP teachers?
Yes. So we've given this information to the ALS directors, and the other thing I have that we're sending to the ALS director that Michelle is working on, and that we can send to you as well, is your specific data from last year of the students who would have exited, who didn't. So we have that comparison data that you can see what their scores were last year with the 1.0 scale score standard and what they would have been with the 2.0. So we can send that out to you. We just got that last week.
So this would mean a comparison. Do we need to kind of look at a new baseline? We're looking at progress on WIDA
Right.
performance.
Right. So looking at a new comparison for progress and what our plan is for growth and for how much it takes students to exit if we're looking at that.
Question here. So does exit, I don't think it does, but does exiting students affect the new accountability legislation, or is it just growth?
I don't think that's, I don't think exit is clear, but I think it's open growth. That's a good question. Oh, repeat the question. So Logan's question was, does exiting, the EL student, does exiting play a part in our new requirements with us, or is it just growth?
Well, the only thing I think would happen is they would stay in for the next year in that subgroup for the accountability.
Right, I think once they get to the final, then we are, then the thought is that they would keep them. We haven't actually landed on anything yet. I mean, WIDA has kind of come out and said, 29 points.
And I'll talk more about this when I talk about accountability. So we had some discussion yesterday, and this is probably before you guys got there, about how are we going to look at WIDA growth. So the EL, it is going to be growth, but I believe that once they get to a 6 or a 5 or whatever the exit status is, that you would, you would look at them to at least maintain. But it's not going to be connected to any SAGE scores or anything. It's just going to be a separate small piece of accountability. But exactly how we calculate the growth, we haven't completely landed on yet.
And I think we need to be careful too about the use of the word exit, because they actually go into monitor status.
Right.
So they direct services, but not systems.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, the term exit, they move from EL status but go into a monitor status for up to 4 years now. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so an upcoming webinar that we have with WIDA where they talk about these score changes and what happened, and just more information about the sales score. It is on April 10th from 3 to 4 Central Time, so that would be 2 to 3 our time. This flyer is attached, so if you are interested in the score changes from WIDA, the 1 hour webinar from them.
We sent that out in the AD memo.
In the memo. Okay. And then another note about the screener, remember we're changing from the WEPT at the end of this year, moving towards the WIDA online screener. So on WIDA, there is a whole page dedicated to this. If you haven't been able to attend, the next slide, I put these pictures in here. Another reminder about our face-to-face training. There's one in Ogden, one in Salt Lake, and one in Provo. These are full-day training for people who will be administering the new screener. A big portion of this day is spent on scoring actual student responses for speaking and writing, so people can get familiar with how to score. The reading and listening will be scored online by the computer, similar to how the access test is scored. So those 3 days, I think the Salt Lake Day is either full or close to full, but there's still spots in Weber and Provo. And then if you can't attend that, there is a 1 hour webinar. You can either attend the live recording or the live version on April 7th, or there are recorded versions on the website. If you can't attend the live version, you can watch or listen to one of the recorded versions. It's a 1 hour webinar that talks about the screener and walks through the whole screener, that doesn't go into depth about scoring and the student responses like the full day training will do. And then, that was it for WIDA.
Is there certification available for this training?
Yeah, so the question was, is there certification available for this training? So with the access test, we ask the test administrators to go through this training and receive the certificate. There is a training online to administer the screener. It's really similar. You walk through modules just like the training for the access test, but it doesn't end with a certificate like the access test does. So there is training, but it's not necessarily a certificate that you get at the end of the training. Any other questions? Okay.
Hey, real quick, did anybody leave this question? Any questions?
Okay. Testing update.
Or David?
Testing update.
With the next slide. Oh, those are mine.
Who's on first?
Okay, I actually don't have that many updates compared to last month, other than these dates are a whole lot closer now. In fact, for DLM and UA, they are in the past. That window opened yesterday. I can just push it. Okay. So I just wanted to, yes, answer a question.
I heard from Robin that the maintenance window will extend to the 21st.
The maintenance window
For the
for
live test administration.
for Sage.
Yeah.
Email on that?
Yeah.
That's the first we would have heard of that.
That's a big deal if you still do that, so
Okay.
Always the last to know, I guess. So just again, a quick reminder, make sure your teachers have accounts in Tide, otherwise rosters won't be created. Make sure students are assigned Wakeford code that actually triggers the test you're expecting them to take. Lots of issues with stale extracts at the moment. I don't know necessarily lots. I'm thinking beginning of the month there was probably a change school quarter. We went from quarter 3 to the 4th quarter, and that caused a lot of extracts to become stale. You can check that by going into the special codes tool, because that will notify you right up on top of your extract stale. Otherwise, if it looks like a large number of students are missing, that's one of the first things I check, and I'll let you know. And again, just to emphasize this, check time before going into test. Don't just go in the morning of the test hoping everything's in there. Check the night before. Check a couple nights before. Make sure that students who you're expecting to be there. Make sure rosters are there. You don't want to have discover a problem when you're in the computer lab with the kids ready to test. And again, you can monitor all testing that's been going on in the monitor test progress in TIDE. Used to be in ORS, now it's in TIDE. And also the special codes tool in Data Gateway, which, Jared, did we start, is that updating now?
Yes, it actually is.
Okay, good, because it hasn't been for most of the year. But no one was testing yet, so we weren't as concerned. But that should be giving you up-to-date data. Otherwise, what I wanted to talk about real quick is this 11th grade opt-out issue, which is what we've been working on the last couple of weeks to make that work correctly. Many of you got an email to double check that we had the information correct. Some of you were confused largely because we opt out by test, and so even though it's very unlikely that an 11th grader would be taking, say, ELA 3, if you said you wanted them out of all ELA, then we had to include that on our list. Sorry for any confusion with that. I think we've got it mostly right. The way that is going to work is we are going to send Sage Portal a slightly different core code, one that will trigger interim and benchmark testing. We figured that's what you would like. So their test will not appear for summative, but they could still go in and do any benchmark testing if you have that plan. So more the point is, if you go in, I don't think that this is live yet. We're going to hopefully get it so it starts working starting Monday when the test window actually opens, as far as I know. I guess we'll have to contact Robin and see. But the point being, if you see 11th graders in there, don't panic. Again, you can pull up any student and it'll say, if it'll say next to it interim or it'll say summative. The summative ones shouldn't be there if that's what you requested. DLM, the window has already opened. I've been working on this, especially with Tracy the past couple of days, trying to get things correct, largely because of two issues. One is we can't always tell from UTRACS who the correct teacher is, so we need you to override either by contacting me or Tracy. And this isn't in the slides because it's a change we talked about. Okay, it'll be in Tracy's slides, good. But there will be another possibly more convenient way to do an override. The other issue is email addresses. If we do not have any teacher email addresses on file at the state, so I've contacted some LEA saying, if you want this teacher to be able to test, I need their email address. So if you've gotten that email, I think I'm only short about 8 addresses at the moment. Get in touch with me as soon as you can with that email address, and I'll get that set up. Otherwise, kids who aren't 1% don't test. The core code is not necessary for test eligibility, but it can make it so you don't have to override, because whatever teacher is assigned to the Essential Elements core code gets to be that kid's teacher in DLM. Mention the overrides. And Tracy will probably talk about that in a little more detail. The other thing I want to say is on yesterday morning, it was the 15th, right? I placed in everyone's UA download folder the UA template. And okay, so basically for all students, the expectation is that you would enter the task ID, which should be in an S 3-digit number format. We've gotten it back before where it's an actual description of what the test was. So it's like this long sentence. This needs to be the S000, S001, whatever. The proficiency level, which should be 1 to 4. and the participation code. So those are pretty much the same codes you'd use for Sage. So if the kid opted out, you could just write 204 in there. For some students, we just have the Cactus ID that, again, we try to get out of Utrex. If that's not the correct Cactus ID, just put the correct Cactus ID in. The idea is whatever you send back, that's what we're going to take. That's what will make it into our warehouse. And if
Wait, you're talking, that you mean SSID, don't
no,
you?
no, do not change the student's SSID. That's their actual SSID.
No, what I'm saying is, okay, you want the teacher's Cactus ID.
So, yes. So this is basically your way of overriding it.
Okay.
It's the same issue because I just pulled, it might be the homeroom teacher, it's whatever was in Utrex. And basically there's not two columns, there's not a Cactus override column, just write the correct Cactus ID in. Whatever you send back is what is going to get pulled in. Was there a question, Julie?
And teacher override done in Kite.
Not for UI.
Repeat the question.
Can teacher overrides be done in Kite? Kite is the DLM system. Tracy will talk about that in a second. The UI is completely separate, so it's a spreadsheet that you were sent. It's not something that gets updated. So basically, that's the idea. You put it in, you send it back, and we're just going to take whatever it is that you give us.
How did you get those list of kids?
That's
from
from your Utrex upload. So it's anyone who is 1% in grades 4 through 11.
David Reader, is that like this?
How did we get the kids? It was anyone who in Utrex was 1% in grades 4 through 11. They generated a science test and they were on the UA template. If there are any kids that are missing because they weren't in Utrex in the morning that I pulled them, maybe because there was a fatal error on their Utrex or they move in later this month, just basically two options are, one, you can just add the row and I will try and make sure that it matches with what you end up sending us in your end of year Utrex. Or if you're okay with it, I can generate a new file at any time and just put it in your Move It folder if that would work better for you. I would imagine if it's just one student, it's probably not too big of a hassle to type in the new student's information. Just make sure as best you can that it matches what's on your SIS, because that should then match Utrex. If it's 10 or 20 students and you want me to produce a new file, just email me and I'll put it in your folder. And I believe that was all for me. Any other questions? Yes, Joellen.
I just got an email back from Robin, and she says, we are opening on Monday morning. There is no delay. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, Robin, we have confirmed with AIR. Sage is opening on Monday, no delay.
This Monday?
Yeah.
The 20th.
You know, Dave, really? Really? Yeah, gonna keep doing that? No. It's just because you're not going to be here next year, right? Right?
Okay. I don't know if we're still in order for the slides. Who's next? But
Is that me?
Yeah.
oh, yes, that's right. Oh, yes. Oh,
Was there other questions?
Okay. So this is just more for your information, a little heads up. The SAGE vertical scale was established, back in 2014 when we first gave the test. And it was established by linking certain particular grade levels. And now what we're going to be doing is looking at how we can actually connect those particular items to certain places on the scale so that we can look at the front side of the scale and it'll be more interpretable by teachers and administrators. Where are kids? What's going on? And so some work is going to be done on the test this spring. And so you know that we have a few, what we call, a few slots or a few test items that are not part of a student's score. They're field test slots. And so because this work is going on this year, your students may see a question or two that is above their grade level. And this is for the linking study that we're currently doing. So, I don't want anybody freaking out and if the teacher sees or the student sees a very difficult question. We want to make sure that we've got the difficulty right. We want to make sure we have the DOK correct
So this is ongoing work, and we also want to make sure that we can tie those items to the scale. So this is the study that's going on right now. So I just want you to know that if you have a teacher that calls you about a question that they don't think is part of their core or something like that, it's probably because it's one of these field test slots. They will not, what?
All grades, all levels.
All grades, all levels, except I don't think the last levels, it's just the lower levels up to, your grade 11 level.
Writing wouldn't change though.
The writing prompts are not going to change, no, they'll be the same.
And it's only above,
It's not below this time, it's only above. They might see a question, but please know that that is not, let's go to the next one. It's got to be evaluated over time. And this just gives you some information about that.
Just math and language arts.
Language arts, right. We're not going to be doing this work in science yet because, because we have the new science tests that are coming up. And then, right. So I just want to make sure that you're aware, and some of that other was just information about the study and what's going to happen. And then I just want to make sure that you understand that the linking items will not, be part of the summative scores, and they won't have any impact on reporting. So it'll just be on the back side. So I know that there was a lot of concern about that in 2014 when we first gave the first administration. And so I just want to give you a heads up so you can get that information to your teachers as well. Okay? This slide says slide assessment, stage assessment, observation. We're really just going to talk about the spring summative. Thank you to all of the districts and LEAs and charters who emailed us and given us the dates for testing. Jared and I have set up all of the appointments. I know we've had, Emily's been having to contact a few of you because the dates conflicted with some of our dates. And so we'll be doing about 15 total observations across charters and districts. And it's going to be Jared, myself, and Tracy at most of the sites, just so you know who's going to be there. It will be all three of us. Sometimes Tracy will not be able to come our stage observation. Most of you will always be Jared and myself, but sometimes Tracy will be coming with us, but it's always going to be the three of us. We feel like having more than one person be there is just makes everybody feel a little more confident. We're interviewing a student, we're interviewing a teacher, so that's kind of the deal. So, all right. So
and if we have not heard back from Emily, that means we're good to go.
Yeah. If you have not heard back from Emily, you are good to go. So, in fact, I know yours is on our calendar, David, so thank you for that. David just asked if you haven't heard from Emily, are we good to go with our observations, and that would be correct. All right, a couple of things just to remind you. This comes off of our Sage Summative Spring webinar. We just want to remind everyone that the window does officially open on Monday. And you want to double check to make sure that you know that the benchmarks and the summative tests will be live again on Monday. And we'd like to thank you for helping with the observations. Couple things you want to remember. David kind of gone over some of this, but this is the technical side. Please make sure that the secure browser has been uploaded to your devices. A quick reminder, if you're using Chrome OS, double check to make sure that you've got the latest version, especially this version. You want to make sure that all the devices are correct. Review the information on the secure browser page. Use the training test, and this is the biggest thing. Please, please, please make sure if you are putting any sort of accommodation or assistive technology on for a student, that the teacher has the student go in on the training test, not the practice test, to make sure it's working before the day they come in so that you're not getting this, the call of it's not working and I'm not sure what to do. We've had a lot of requests from people to have us come out and train teachers on how to use the tabs and how to do that. And really, that's assessment directors, that's your wheelhouse, and we're happy to help you with questions. But the number one thing you want to do is make sure the teachers have reviewed the TAM, make sure they know what they have to do, and have them ask you questions. Have them give a practice test, because a practice test is the closest administration to what they're going to have to do. They have to initialize the test. And then also have them review the training test so they understand the functionality, so that during testing, if the student has a question, they know how to answer the question. It's just, there's no way we can give confidence to teachers who have never done this before unless they've actually practiced. It's just kind of the nature of the way it works. And I think another quick thing for the first time, and instead of saying in 3 years, Utah Compose is down right now. There was an issue with the Cactus validation program last night, and so you cannot get into Utah Compose. And I think it actually is the first time it's ever been down in 3 years. They are working on it. It's going to be a couple hours at least while they're trying to do a patch so that they can kind of bypass the, what we're trying to do. So if you're hearing from teachers out in the field that it's really that it's down, we apologize. I've been answering friends, all morning. That there's not anything we can do about that. It's just not letting anybody in. It's just saying, who are you? So that's kind of what's going on. And Tracy, you want to talk about accommodations in DLM?
Okay. Okay, so just a reminder to make sure that you mark your accommodations in Tide, and a reminder that these are the 7 accommodations that can be on a student's IEP 504 EL10 that you will mark in there. So Braille calculation device for 6th grade only, right? Third through 5th grade does not get calculators, even if it's on an IEP. Large print, standardized paper, that's the print on request accommodation. Scribe, if you have a kiddo that's using Scribe, whether it's Human Scribe, whether it's the voice recognition software, you need to fill out a request form, okay? And the sooner you get it to me, the sooner I can process it. It's taking me a couple weeks to try to get through all of them. So make sure you send that to me. Sign language and then visual representations, which is manipulative. So those are the things that you mark accommodation for. That's where the accommodations get marked. So you actually print on request, Braille, Scribe, and American Sign Language are the only ones that you actually have to trigger in the system as accommodated, right? Because it changes the platform. Okay. And those are some of your other resources, right? So if you're planning on, doesn't matter whether it's a student on an IEP or not, that has to be set. If you're going to do print size, color choice, descriptive audio, right? You can set that for any kiddo, especially if you've got a kiddo with low vision. Our sign language kiddos need to have that descriptive audio enabled. And permissive mode is what gets enabled by me. This year you used to be able to enable it. I'm the one that enables that. That's if you're using assistive technology. So that Scribe piece, our voice recognition software. If you've got a kiddo that's got a communication device that's infiltrating the system, assistive technology, I have to enable that or the system will not allow it to infiltrate, so you need to let me know. Any questions with that one? I think head nodding. So, okay. And then that's just another screenshot of what it looks like. So that is the technology piece. Go ahead. DLM, so David went over this window opened yesterday. I do have to say we had 33 teachers throughout the state that did the mid-year window this year on DLM. So if any of you have teachers that did that, congrats to you. Hopefully they got some good information. Make sure teachers have completed a first contact survey on the kiddo. A kiddo will not receive the test slip unless that is completed. Okay, so that's the number one step. David, rostering. If you have a wrong roster, right, if you have a teacher enrolled in an ELA or math class that's a gen ed or resource class that's not tied to essential elements, you used to have to contact us to do an override. I'm going to let David talk about what he decided yesterday.
It was earlier in the week than yesterday. Okay, so here's the deal. The reason we have to do this is because I generate a file pretty much every morning based on what is currently in Utrex and upload it into the DLM system. You are probably aware that if you have district level access to the DLM system, you can go in and you can create your own rosters. You can move students from one roster to another. and that's all great, and then I upload my file and it deletes all your work. Which is why you had to contact me to override what I'm sending so I know what changes you want, and then it won't go in and break things for you later. So it's somewhat of a cumbersome and annoying process, and one of the reasons we were doing it is because DLM made it, and last year DLM said that tests followed students. Really, they followed rosters. If you moved the student from one roster to another, then the tests wouldn't always follow. Created a lot of problems. So we wanted to make sure there was just one person making the changes. So they fixed that this year. So the test actually follows students. And they've also made it so a student can only be on one roster per subject. So if you were to move a kid from one teacher A's ELA to teacher B's ELA, it deletes them off teacher A. So they can only be on one roster per subject at a time. So it makes it a little bit cleaner that if you were to go in and make a change, it's maybe not as problematic. So it's more what I'd like to propose and see if everyone thinks, because basically I want to make it easier for you to not have to email me every time it's like, oh, we realized one student has an issue. The idea was that we can make it so if you were a district level user, so either the district test coordinator or the district user, that if you make a change in the DLM system in type, then when I pull the file, that it will take your changes to only rosters, not to any other part. But it'll take changes to rosters and automatically put them into my override file. So it's like a simpler way, potentially, because if you've been in the DLM, you know their interface is not necessarily the most user-friendly. But that if you were to make a change, it would basically save you the step of emailing me to ask for it to be changed. It would just come right in. And then, so basically the idea would be that we would allow district level users to change rosters, and instead of having to email me or Tracy to make the change for you. How comfortable does everyone feel with this idea? Do you like it?
So, sorry, we're kind of on the fly with this here.
If it works, we'll like it.
So it makes me nervous. This makes me nervous because we can mess up data really quickly, right? And if we have, messed up data, then it takes longer to get score reports. And so we just got to make sure that you're doing things correctly. If you have a student or a teacher that doesn't have a roster created, what are we doing with that, David?
Well,
are you going to let them create student or teacher rosters?
they would be able to. I can't stop them from doing it. I wouldn't know the difference.
So with that, if you go in and you create a teacher roster, right, there's a drop-down menu in there, and those of you that are familiar that have been in there should probably know what this is. You can select a subject, English, language arts, or mathematics, and then it gives you on the side a course. Do not select a course for a teacher. Don't. Just give them the subject. ELA or math. If you select a course, it can not going to get testlets. You're going to mess up that data. Okay. So maybe what we need to do is put out something, send out an AD memo of exactly what we want things to look like if this is the decision that we're going to let you do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the idea would be also, like, I'd be monitoring it as it goes. So I download the rosters that are in there, look and see, oh, so-and-so did it. Let me just look over their roster real quick. Yeah, that's fine. It'll automatically go into the override. Again, I would think, though, that in many cases, if it's just one student, because that's often what happens, it's like, oh, this one teacher moved. I need to assign this different teacher to it. Still, I would think doing the override file through MoveIt, if you've got like 20 or 30 students, would be a much easier option in bulk. But we're, just trying to think of how can we make less work for you? How can we make less work for ourselves? It seemed like a kind of thing that in most cases shouldn't break anything, but since it's something we haven't done before, there might be ways it would break that we haven't anticipated. So that's actually set up. It's actually live right now. If you were to go in and make a change, it will go into the override file automatically that way. So I will be monitoring that and seeing how well it works. And then, like Tracy said, we can put out more specific instructions if we notice that things are being done in a way that might be breaking things. In most cases, though, if you're just simply switching students from one roster to another, it shouldn't be a problem. Rob?
Back on accommodations, Tracy.
Yes.
Repeat the question.
Oh, Rob, that's about accommodation.
In the participation and accommodations policy manual, there's a table that has all of them, and then I think 6 columns for various tests, but it doesn't have a column for the skills tests in CTE. The question I've got is, I'm a teacher, do these same accommodations apply to the CTE stuff? And if so, can you put it into that table?
That's a good question.
Oh, good.
I'm going to be honest and tell you I don't have an exact answer to that, so let me get back to you
Great.
on, I'm not familiar with the CTE assessment, so I'll get back to you on that. That's a great question. I think it's at the end, or is there, I can't remember. Oh, just wanted to let you know, to teachers, there's a new test progress field in DLM. So when your teachers pull up into test management and they go to pull up those test tickets next to the sessions, they'll see this now. I noticed yesterday that there was one field in between tickets and test progress. I didn't know 100% what it was going to look like until it went live yesterday. But they'll be able to see, you know, Johnny's had completed 3 out of 5 templates, so that's super awesome. So just be aware of that. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay, you can click. All right, so ACT, Joellen's going to cover ACT Aspire in the legislative update. So if that question is out there, you can save it for Joellen. So this is just an overview, schedule of events. So this coming Tuesday, we have the first makeup test, and then April 19th is the second. I think the biggest part on this slide anyway is reports should be coming out 3 to 8 weeks after student tests have been received. So those will start coming now that it's as it gets towards the end of March. I wanted to let you know, because I've received lots of questions as far as spring 2018 test dates. Here they are. So it'll be the similar kind of format, and the dates are pretty close. Other than April 3rd, which I understand had something to do with Easter and how they wanted to organize that. And then as far as SHMOOP, we're trying to get the word out. Some districts know, some don't. So we're planning on doing monthly webinars. It'll be the last Friday of each month, starting at 10 a.m. I'm thinking an hour each one. And so just so you know, and I wanted to put on the bottom, please share with school counselors and whoever else might need it, because I often get questions from those folks wanting to know more about it. And that's it. Were there any questions on that information as far as ACT?
How many of you tried the online, doing it online this year? How did it go?
We had a problem where their technical people had to make a dynamic change to communicate with the local testing server. It was something that was not tested by them prior to the session. To communicate except once it got into the secure mode. And it was hard getting through to them on the phone. Once we did, they were able to fix it fairly quick. But we had, you know, a classroom of pilot students waiting and a couple of teachers anxious.
Yeah. And
It was okay.
There was the one day when it all went down, right?
Yeah, the whole world ended on yeah, ALA, yeah.
I just remember that's the same system that you're going to use for the fire.
Yeah. Oh.
my answer for Joel, and then I've sent this in an email so you have the data for ACT. We had a problem with communication between the computers in the test room and the local caching server, which was in the same room. And it was a flaw where they had not tested it in the secure mode. All of those computers would communicate with the local caching server until we went live administration. The problem was that it was hard to get, say, ACT on the phone that morning. Once we got them on the phone, they were able to fix it quickly. But there was a 30-minute delay out.
Rob,
Yeah.
did you guys have a mock test?
Oh, yeah, we did all of that. The mock all worked fine, but it wasn't secure. It was only when it had to go secure that it failed.
We had the same problem on the first day with all the other problems, so.
Yeah, that Tuesday, February 28th was the day you'll remember.
So I'd be interested if there's time to hear, how do you guys mess with your school schedules to get your kids in there for the,
Yeah, I was kind of, how do you do that? Yeah.
how do you pull that off?
So, well, so I can respond from,
One class, but do they have to do the whole test in one sitting?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't do it over multiple days. You could test on multiple days, but, sorry, you can test on multiple days,
That's a different kid.
but once you start the test, you have to finish the test.
So
So
did the kids just start, it takes like 4 hours, right?
it does, yeah. It's 3 hours and 40 minutes.
Just out of classes while they were in there.
We
So-
need everybody to be on the line.
Yeah, so the questions are, how did you handle it administratively with other classes? How did your school function? We actually had all students, except for 11th grade, not be on school grounds. We had activities, learning projects going on in the community, and so forth.
So you can use your whole building.
Yes, we did. We had computers, mobile computers in multiple classrooms. And because it failed so miserably, we're now looking for an alternative location on a makeup day. So we haven't even figured that out, and it is, we're doing it on Tuesday, so.
Thank you for piloting that.
And I want to be really clear that USBE does not promote not having school for other students on that day. Do not ask me that.
I went on the 8th, I think it was, and went to Salem Hills High, and Nebo did theirs on the 8th. And it went pretty smooth. There were a few students that had some login issues, but otherwise they had Chromebooks, and they had, I think it was 15 classrooms full of 11th grade students taking that. And it seemed to go smoothly when I was there with that.
They did the same thing too. No other students were
Yes, they
in
did.
the college.
Yes,
or in
they
the-
He
Yeah,
just
you're
said
correct.
no other students at
Wrong,
Depot.
yeah.
My question has to do with SAGE, ACT practice. So if a district subscribes to Master Connect or Illuminate, is there any way to get this ACT practice questions for those? Have you been asked?
I haven't been asked that question. Yeah, the question about kind of the integration of ACT practice into other platforms and systems. And I haven't been asked that. I haven't looked into it. I'd be glad to look into it and ask more about that. Right now, as far as from the state, it's just been smooth.
Well, Learning Express, Learning Express in Utah's online library has some ACT.
So Learning Express in Utah's online library has ACT prep. And UAN, yeah, and the whole UAN. Okay. And with the online, just real quick, I would like to send out a survey to get feedback. I appreciate the feedback from Granite and other places, whether it's positive or negative, so that I can get that back to ACT and say, look, this is how the field responded, and this is what's happening. So that will be coming out as I get those questions written, and hope that you would take some time. Short, but give me what you've got. Any other questions?
Thank you. Okay. So, stage writing, scoring, and kindergarten. So just a reminder. I know she has to be not I'll stand over here with not my back to the computer. Okay. Okay. So with stage writing, remember that this year we do have some human back reading. Up to 20% of the writing tests will be back read by a human scorer. Those will be the ones that are the red flag ones that, because of one of the condition codes, that the students either didn't write enough or they wrote IDK over and over and over. The scoring system will catch those, and then the human reader will back read those and verify that scoring. So if you have teachers that say, my student took this test, it was submitted, but I don't have a score, those will be ones, if the test was submitted, so check to make sure that there was a test submitted for that student. It will take up to 5 days for the human reader to score those and then get score loaded into the system. So if you have teachers that ask that they have, I know the student sent it in, but I don't have any score for the student on the writing portion, make sure that you check to see that it was submitted and then check back within 3 to 5 days and they should have a score there. Questions on the writing scoring? Okay. Emily.
What will cause it to be selected for human scoring?
So the question is what will cause it to be selected for human scoring? There are a couple of flags that will get picked up. Like I said, if it's too short for the computer to score it, or that the student puts in BBBB or IDK, those kind of things. And low confidence scores, right. The cut and paste piece where they're looking at, they can see how much of the text was copied directly from the passage material system. And, okay. Oh, yeah, Julie, come on up.
Knows this, but with the scoring verification, there's two things happening. There's condition codes that are being applied to the writing responses that are illegible and BBBBB, and they responded in another language, those kind of things. Then the 20% is also it's these low confidence scores. So when the automatic scoring machine issues a score, there's a certain number of those that we think are less likely to be the real score. And it's this, psychometric process with lots of math behind it. So the tests that we are the least confident in the score issued by the machine, the lowest group of those are flagged for human validation. Does that make sense? In addition to these condition codes that are being applied that will affect the reporting as well. I don't know if that clarifies to make it worse. I'll give you the microphone back.
Okay. Other questions about scoring? So if you have teachers that are concerned about a no score, check for those links first and then follow up in a couple of days. And if there's still no score, then please contact us and we'll look into it. Okay. And kindergarten. So, I can push the button myself. Okay. All right. So as you know, we're developing a kindergarten entry and exit profile. This is something that, as LEAs, you've been administering your own kindergarten entry and exit assessments for several years. Statewide, we've been looking at the trends of data across the state of kindergarten, specifically with DIBELS, how students enter kindergarten and how they exit kindergarten. Across the state the last several years, we've been exiting fewer and fewer students from kindergarten at benchmark level. So they're entering first grade, fewer students proficient as far as the DIBELS. So you can see, especially last year, the 2015-16 year, we entered 63% of students and only exited 68% of students at proficient levels on DIBELS in kindergarten. So only moving 5% of those students, and that's gone down quite a bit from the last several years. So as we're looking at kindergarten, this past year, the beginning of the year, we tested 42,000 students, about 60% or 60% of those students came in at benchmark at the beginning of the year, with about 40% not at benchmark. And as we look at what you're able to do with OEK funds, you're able to service about 20% of that, 40% that's not making it, leaving about 20% of students that would possibly be eligible for OEK services if you had additional funding for OEK. So, I'm going to skip that slide for now. We've been developing this kindergarten assessment, entry assessment, as well as we're working on the process of developing an exit assessment that will start this fall. So the fall of 2017 will be when the kindergarten teachers would administer this state level common assessment. We have trainings across the state. It was attached in the email that we sent this morning, the list of trainings for kindergarten teachers. We're trying to go out and reach as many kindergarten teachers as possible. The trainings will be from 10 to 1. The teachers will receive a stipend for attending, as well as receive all of the printed materials for the teacher and the student to administer the assessment for attending the training.
Do we also attach the TAM, so these guys have a copy of the TAM?
We don't yet because it's still in draft form. Okay. So the TAM is still in draft form, so we haven't attached that yet. We're getting really close to finishing. We're talking with the Center for Assessment on the scoring and getting that done. And then we're going to be sending the TAM to printing. So as soon as we send the TAM to printing, we'll also send it to you so you have a digital copy. But know that we'll be printing all the materials for one teacher set for each kindergarten teacher in the state. If they attend the training in person, they'll receive those printed materials. And then if you have teachers that haven't been able to attend those trainings, you can find that out to you this year. So this year we're printing materials, and then after this year, if you need additional materials, you'll have access to print those yourself. Yes.
I can't see the dates there. How soon?
Right, I'm sorry. This is really small, but you have the PDF or the Word document attached in the file. They start at the beginning of June. The first date is June 6th in Jordan. The last date is August 1st in Granite. And Logan brought up a point yesterday that many of you still have kindergarten teachers that haven't been hired by August 1st. And so training them, you're welcome to train the trainers. So we're trying to train as many kindergarten teachers as possible, but you can train your own teachers. You have teachers that you hire after that point that will be administering this assessment in the fall that weren't able to attend one of the summer dates.
So there's a question online. Question online. What is OEK?
Oh, what is OEK? OEK stands for Optional Extended Day Kindergarten. Okay. Other questions about the training? We tried to go as many places across the state as we could, and along the Wasatch Front, go a couple of times, especially with some of our larger districts, to fit in as many people as possible. We're working with our IT department on developing an entry for the data, so that all of that information will go into the data gateway, and your teachers will have access to immediate data as well as some reports. This first year, we won't have scaled scores yet because we're going to take a look at the data afterwards, but they will get some raw information as they put those scores into the data system. Yes.
So would you say it's optional this year?
No, it's not optional this year. So the question is it optional? The question is no. All kindergarten teachers will be participating in administering this assessment this year. Yes.
And the kindergarten assessment is based upon kindergarten standards.
This entry kindergarten assessment is based on the pre-K standards, so how students would exit pre-K.
But then how can we use that as a post-assessment, which is based upon kindergarten standards, two different standards? Help me understand.
Right. So what we have with the pre-K standards and the kindergarten standards are looking at where a student will likely enter kindergarten, what we would expect from a student with pre-K, and then the exit standards for kindergarten. It won't be the same exact test, but we'll look at comparisons, similar to how DIBELS does, where DIBELS looks at how a student starts at the beginning of the year and how they end. It's different assessments. There are some assessments that are added midway through the year of the sub-parts of kindergarten and what they test at the beginning of the year. And we'll look at correlating those with the expected growth of what we'd expect in students through kindergarten. I think it's not hand, Logan.
I got it.
Okay. Yes.
What's the earliest date that a kindergarten teacher can start on the beginning of your profile?
So the beginning date that a kindergarten teacher would start, the timeline is 3 weeks before the start of school and 2 weeks after. So we want to keep it standard for, a student starting in May. So I know some districts do, when they're trying to figure out who's going into their OEK program, some look at testing kids with the kindergarten roundup in May. So this would not be an appropriate use for that in May. If you want to do that 3 weeks before the start of school and 2 weeks following the start of school. And then the end window for the exit assessment will be 4 weeks from the end date, your last day of school. That will be the exit assessment, will be those time periods.
Yeah, and then when do you predict this electronic data tool will be open?
The electronic data tool, we're hoping in the summer for the year-round schools. We are, okay. Yes, yeah, so we're working with our IT team, so that will be ready for, we're hopeful that we'll be ready for the schools to have year-round schools in July.
Okay, do you think we'll have an option to upload data, or will teachers really have to individually put it straight into the data gateway?
That's a good question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question is, will they have an option to upload the data, or will the teachers have to input individual student data? At this point, it's someone inputting the data for each student. If that was something that we'll consider as the data upload.
Okay,
But somehow that data has to get entered. I mean, you're uploading it somewhere, whether it's on your own system and then uploading it to our system, or somewhere the data is being entered.
So, and then if, as data is being entered, will the district have the ability to extract the raw data from that data gateway tool?
And we'll have a report as well, so there will be an individual student report that will be
That's
available.
not what I'm asking.
That you'll have the data available for you to be able to export in a spreadsheet type or CSV file, yeah.
So will teachers get training like on June 1st?
On entering the data, yes, yes. So the plan is for part of the training, we'll spend the time on looking at the materials, walking over each question, as well as the data entry portion and showing how to enter the data for the assessment, as well as looking at the standard setting and what they expect, what would you expect as kindergarten students for this question to be proficient. And start talking about standard setting with the kindergarten teachers so they have a say in some of the standards.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have more. Would you mind CCing assessment directors if you email kindergarten teachers and start telling them how to go about accomplishing this assessment and when the trainings are?
Yeah, so the question is,
CC us so that we know what our teachers are being asked to do.
right. The question is making sure the assessment directors, or I guess statement is making sure the assessment directors are aware anytime we're communicating with the kindergarten teachers about training dates that are available and what will be covered in the training. So you're all aware of what the training will entail and where.
And if you'd like to, you could come to a couple of trainings.
Right, you're more than welcome to come to a training or two if you're also aware and know of the training.
Because it seems a little unusual to me that you're just going straight to kindergarten teachers and telling them about the test and what they should do and when.
So a statement of
Really are-
a concern about directly to the kindergarten teachers. And so that's why we're trying to give everyone a heads up about here's what's coming. We've also talked to communicated with the literacy directors about the timeline. Really, we were trying to set up dates and schedule dates so the dates are in place, but we haven't started communicating anything directly to kindergarten teachers yet. But we had to lock down locations and dates so we can make sure we have people available to administer the training as well as locations locked down. But thank you for your comments.
When do you plan to do that? Well, I'll give my kindergarten people a heads up to say, watch for this invitation from the state office. So they know that we support it, but when are you planning on sending your invitation?
So the question was, when are we planning on sending the invitations out to you all, the literacy directors, the curriculum directors, as well as kindergarten teachers? Let me back up a step. I don't think we're sending this email directly to kindergarten teachers. I don't think we have that access, but teaching and learning will be involved with that as well to send the information. So you for sure will be involved in that communication and getting that out to your people, your teachers, and your literacy coaches and whoever else you have involved that you would like to come. Jennifer Johnson is locking down the dates, and we're just finalizing how many participants we have at each location and then uploading that to OnTrack so people will have the information to start logging into OnTrack. I'm assuming within the next week or two that'll be up and ready so people can start planning for summer and it's going to attend. And we'll communicate that with you all, with literacy directors, curriculum directors, when all that's happening. Kim, 2 questions.
I would like to know what OEK is.
We answered that. So OEK is optional extended day kindergarten.
Okay, and the other question is, they would like you to repeat when they would be able to view the kindergarten.
When they'll be able to view the assessment So right now it's in draft mode. We're still working with the Center for Assessment on the scoring part and weighting different scoring. That'll be ready when we send the materials to printing. I'm hoping that mid-April, that's when we send the materials to print. So that's when you'll be able to see the towns.
And Christine made a really good point about like why are we doing this so quickly and going straight to the kindergarten teachers, and that is because this was just recently approved by the USDE and the funding came from the state legislature and it has to happen this summer. So it's a matter of, you know, we get final word on May 15th and then we have to have something in place by June, and that's a really tight timeline. And optional extended day kindergarten are all those services that are either full-day kindergarten, extended time in kindergarten, the technology supports around extended support services for kindergarten. And that funding is about $7.5 million, and it has been flat since 2008. And so statewide, the powers that be are saying, you know, we've got to have some common assessment to understand where kids are and actually support that funding. What we don't support is using this in any way to be evaluative or a part of accountability or anything like that. It's only program evaluation. So it's for those purposes. And I think it will give some good information to kindergarten teachers. Kindergarten teachers will be involved in all kinds of things around the scale score, around what they think kids should know how to do. There won't maybe necessarily be a proficiency. This is not this is more of a profile of students and seeing how they're ready to learn as they go forward in kindergarten. And there's only about 15 questions. It should go fairly quickly. Teachers can do it in about 10 to 15 minutes. And like Sid said, we're going to get that out to you. Hopefully by the end of next week, you'll see the assessment. We'll send it out in a TAN. Everybody will have it. It's not going to necessarily be secure. So, and I'll talk in just a minute about how we're thinking about the data entry. I think you have one more slide before that, and then I'll talk about it.
Okay. I think the next one is on DIBELS. So are there any more questions on the kindergarten assessment? Kim. Oh, Kim says Utah Compose is now up. So if you have people trying to use Utah Compose, it is ready to go. All right. And kindergarten, other questions? Okay, you'll be hearing more and more and more from us on that. One more just opportunity for learning. The DIBELS Pathway of Progress information and learning how to make those goals for students and use that information is still something fairly new for teachers and for literacy directors and literacy coaches. We had contract with DMG, who are the authors of DIBELS and who created the Pathways of Progress, to provide some training on how to utilize Pathways of Progress. So this is put on your teaching and learning department. But you have this, and this picture is small, but you have this document in the email as well about different places across the state where there will be one full-day training. These are put on by us with DMG, but the priority for the registration will be for these districts that specifically asked for this in the spring. If your district didn't ask for this in the spring, we'll have some funding and time later in the summer for other districts that would like other activities for Pathways of Progress. So these are up and available. They're on Praxis. If you have teachers or literacy coaches that are interested in learning more about Pathways of Progress, they can attend these trainings. And even if you don't use DMG as your DIBELS data, if you use Amplify, this is specific to Pathways and how to make the goals. And at the end, Amplify will be there for about the last hour to show, if you use Amplify, how to manipulate their technology. So that's available. But know that if your district is not one of these districts associated with these 5 days, we will be having more coming. So priority will be given to teachers in these districts, but if there's openings, then other people can attend. Okay. Look.
Do you anticipate any changes to the guidelines for alternate testing next year, or are we going to plan on doing the same thing we did?
As far as DIBELS? So do you anticipate any changes with the alternate assessment with DIBELS? At this point, no. We'll continue with the TOSRAC or the other alternate reverse final for DIBELS at this point. And we are in talks of
creating an alternate assessment for the kindergarten as well that will be similar to the alternate for schools. Okay. So in considering how we would get this information in for the kindergarten assessment, knowing that we want a specific point in time so we can have some general good data from kids, we found that the easiest way to do this would be through the data gateway. So many of you know that when kindergarten students first come to school, they're not necessarily assigned to a teacher yet. So, and Jared Brown, I'm talking to you. He's from our IT department, so he's told me some things, so if I say this wrong, you can help me out. And maybe some of these group uploads or batch uploads kinds of ideas. But what the idea that we had that we thought would be easy, if the kindergarten teacher is sitting at a computer, if those kids are in your SIS system, okay, so they have to be in there early, but they do not have to be assigned to a teacher yet, okay? They can be assigned to a school. So that should help out some for those early enrollments. So the SSID is necessary for students before the, to be submitted into UTREX. So that you can do on your end first. And so they can be submitted to UTREX without being scheduled to a class or to a teacher, those kindergarten students. So as long as they're attached to a school, then when the kindergarten teacher goes into the data gateway, through the secure data gateway, what they will see is they will see all students in the school. Even though they're not going to be testing all students, they'll just see all students in their school.
Alphabetized by alphabet or by SSID?
Sure.
That's the next one.
Okay. So to allow testing before school starts, all students will be displayed by both name and SSID on a list to be selected to test since they may not be associated with any particular teacher.
Basically with a search. So you can, however they're sorted, whatever works best for you. So
Yeah, I mean, he could
Alphabetical.
alphabetical, Jared. Okay. Is that all right?
So once they are assigned to a teacher, or is it going to be all of the teachers see all the students regardless of whether they're assigned or not?
Well, if they're assigned to a teacher, then they'll, Jared, how would that work? Would they still see all the, I mean, we were trying to think, because we know that a lot of this sorting of kids, what teachers they go to doesn't happen until after you would give the assessment.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, so there's things that we can think about that if you do have them already assigned to a teacher, you know.
Orders assigned kind of when the teacher's logged in, whoever the students are assigned to that teacher.
We haven't done this before, right? We're walking through.
Well,
Yeah,
it's a good workaround.
We're
It's
trying to
really
work
good.
around.
It's a good workaround.
Yeah.
So what we could do is we could make it so that if you're logged in as a teacher and there are students assigned to you, those students show up at the top and the remaining students show at the bottom or something like that.
Yeah.
Good. So these are the kids we're sure are going to go to the teacher. Some of the rest we're kind of wish-washy until we evaluate and see that might function best if we do it that way.
Yeah.
And a follow-up question, are there any scheduled UTREX shutdowns during the week or so? Or-
That's a really good
I know
question.
that sometimes they happen on schedule, and that's fine. People work around that. But
So he's asking, is UTREX going to shut down? This might cause us a problem. So we're actually trying to, I think this is Julie Quinn's goal, is to make sure that we don't have any shutdowns. But I'm going to let you answer that.
Right, and this is at the beginning of the school year, so this would be prior to school starting. So those shutdowns, other than, like you said, an unplanned kind of thing. As it stands right now, even with the current system that we have, I mean, technically we could start really collecting data once it's been validated in like, mid-August or something like that, but nobody's submitting any data at that point. So in all reality, we're ready to go before any data is really ever being submitted to us. So barring any unforeseen things, the system UTREX should be up, ready to accept data pretty much any time prior to school starting. As Joellen said, we're moving to allow the ability for kind of continuous submissions. So I don't know if you mentioned that or whatever, but that's a
that's a during the school year side of things. This is after the school year is done, before the next one starts up, will allow those submissions.
Just a request, be mindful of LEAs with year-round schools, starting in July.
Yes, Clyde's saying mid-July for year-round schools. So like he said, they're ready to accept the data. So as soon as you submit those SSIDs from your kindergarten students, then they should be ready to go. So, you know, we're trying to make this really simple for kindergarten teachers to just sit by a student and be able to just enter this data as they sit next to the student. Scores will be entered using uppercase letters like 19 out of 26 if it's a, you know, letter recognition kind of thing, or yeses or nos, and then they'll be able to see those reports. So the scores will be weighted in reports, so letters don't necessarily account for the majority. I mean, that's what we're working through right now, is the weighting on the other end. So I know that we'll probably have some glitches as we go through this. This is the first time kind of thing, and we will work through those. If you have ideas and suggestions from your LEAs, they can help make this process go a little bit smoother, like Chris said, maybe batch uploads or something. Let us know, and we will attempt to work through those. We've just had a couple of brainstorming ideas on how to get this done in a way that the teachers can enter directly into the data gateway and then see some great reports that we haven't yet developed, that we'll be developing on the other side of that. Okay? All right. Any further questions about kindergarten? If you'll go back to the turnaround, Bill. So Dr. Nye is here, and we're going to let him come up and talk to us a little bit. So we have two remaining topics, and I know that we're running tight on time, so we're going to run over probably a few minutes. But the two topics are what happened during the legislative session. And so I told Rich, I said, aren't you glad? Aren't you going to go on vacation with me? Aren't you glad the legislative session is over? And he says, well, it's really kind of fun. So there's something really wrong here. We're thinking that that's fun. But I've asked him to come and talk about the school turnaround bill and the changes that are happening in that. So he can talk about that, and then I'll talk about some
Joellen, there's a question online. What if a student changes schools? Will they need to be tested again? Will the scores follow them?
The scores should follow them. They'll be in new tracks.
The scores, the question is kid moves schools, will they need to be retested? The scores will follow them. They will be in the data gateway new track, so the scores will follow them from school to school. Unless a teacher wants to reevaluate a kindergarten student, it would just depend. So that would be an LEA choice.
Okay.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Certainly was what I would think a fun and enlightening, engaging session that we had. It really turned out quite well for education. There's a lot of things that we got that we certainly enjoyed. There's some bills that we weren't necessarily fans of that died. And all in all, though, it was, some concessions were made. And in the end, once bills start getting discussed on the floor, sometimes amendments and such, can get input. But overall, I think it was really a good session for education. One of, I would say, two must-pass bills, right, as it pertains to assessment and accountability, is Senate Bill 220, which is accountability and goal. I'm not sure if you already talked about that.
Yeah, I'll talk about
maybe later. Okay. And the other one is SB 234, both sponsored on the Senate side by Senator Milner in collaboration with President Earhauser. And what SB 234 was is certain amendments needed to be made to how schools were identified for turnaround, the resources they receive, how they contract with experts, and what the exit criteria is, exit or successful completion of the time period that they're in that. So school turnaround essentially did 5 things for schools. And so under the old law, any school that fell within the bottom 3%, according to the accountability system, and they're identified by points, fell into the bottom 3% were automatically enlisted in receiving turnaround services and certain guardrails to help them improve. What we found was there's a certain volatility in that 3%. As we saw 65 different schools over the course of 4 years actually come in and out of that. We felt like that we could say if the school was in the bottom 3% for 2 consecutive years, then we would really just start hitting those schools with the most need. And so for cohort 2, which was identified last fall, if they, this fall, are in the bottom 3%, then they will be in turnaround. If they don't, if they fall back, or if they get back out of the bottom 3%, right, they start doing some things during the planning year, then they're not going to fall under the turnaround specifications for improvement. And so that was big. We found that about 15 schools in those 4 years, generally 15 schools were in the bottom 3% versus, we had 26 schools the first year, which was great. That's where we started. This last fall, we had 17 schools had a turnaround, suggesting that of the original 26, at least 17 of them are no longer in the bottom 3%, which is great for a lot of different reasons. There's reasons for that. So that was a big one for us. In terms of part of the process of the turnaround experience, we'll say, is under the old law, the turnaround expert, which is, there's a list of 5 that were determined from an RFP process that LEAs could choose from, schools could choose from. And what would happen was the turnaround expert would go in and do the needs analysis and identify the root causes and then align what their priorities are to the things that they identified. We wanted to break that a little bit. There is some degree of a conflict of interest there. I'm going to identify that you need these services and we provide those in your root cause. And so the root cause will be done independent of the turnaround expert. The turnaround expert will then need to, based on the needs analysis and the root causes identified, submit a scope of work to address what it is that the school needs. So it separates those two things. We feel like we'll be able to get a better alignment to what the schools need. And part of identification of those needs, each school, when they want to enter turnaround, they establish a turnaround committee. It's very prescriptive who's in that committee. They work with the local school board, and then, of course, that follows through. So we wanted to make sure that there's continuity between the needs analysis, the root causes, the scope of work that's being proposed, and outcomes to make sure that the plan that's being articulated, the school improvement plan, would have that sort of continuity through those. So please. Third thing, it also brings in, enhances the role of the local school board. And one way to do this, among a couple different ways that are in the bill, one way is for the local school boards to contract themselves with the turnaround experts. So currently, under the former law, the state board contracted with turnaround experts and then went and started working, even though the schools still had the opportunity to select which vendor. All the contracting processes were done here. What we're going to find, or what we're hoping to see here, as we allocate, the State Board of Education allocates a base plus enrollment resource for funding, that the LEA then will in turn take that and contract specifically with the contract expert. With that, that should allow additional funding, depending on how the LEA chooses to use that funding, for other things, like wraparound services, maybe parent engagement, parental visits, whatever the LEA needs. And that is also articulated in the scope of work that's submitted to the state board for approval. So enhancing the role of the local education boards to engage in that. And one of the things is we got a lot of feedback. So under the old law, if a school makes improvement, then at the end of that, there was this reward and incentive. And as you know, it's about $1,000 that a teacher could get at the end if they're successful at the end of 3 years. Now, what we heard back from a lot of the teachers was, well, and I quote, that's a slap to the face, because, we're really not into this, and whatever. And that's, granted, you look at it nationally, $1,000 isn't enough to incentivize certain behaviors, I suppose, right? I mean, we get that. So what this does is actually allows the LEA to choose to use certain funds, additional funds up front to recruit and to retain. So it allows some more flexibility at the LEA level to determine how they use those funds. This is in addition to and separate from Winter's bill that had bonuses, the $5,000 bonuses for teachers that get 70% or in the MVP for teachers that are working in Title I schools. So separate from that, but there is going to be greater resources at the beginning.
Can you stay up here a little more so that people can hear you better?
They can hear me better.
If you stand up here.
I'll definitely go further that way. But, all right, I will do.
Thank you.
And so teacher recruitment and retention, funds up front, and the last 2 bullets. So this is actually something I get very excited about, and something that we work to get into this legislation. So under the former law, a school would be successful in their turnaround efforts if they raise the letter grade. Okay, so they're identified by points, but they're exiting by letter grade. As you know, last year and this year, there's been some changes in how grades are calculated and things like that. I wanted to get away from that. Not only that, if everything remains constant, you still have schools that are identified maybe, I don't know, 10 points below the next letter grade letter change. They make 9 points improvement, and they still have not succeeded. Yet you could have a school that needed 2 points improvement and make 3 and be considered successful, right? It just is counterintuitive to how we measure progress. And so something that we were able to work with legislators on is to allow us to measure statistically the improvement and to be able to create that formula per school, each of it be very school specific, to say this is where you start, this is where you end it. We take the mean gain score and work with the pooled or the grand mean scale score. We could come up with a difference, whether it's statistically significant or not, and understand the magnitude of that and factor in Q applied and effect size to determine the magnitude. So yes, statistically significant, thereby, hopefully, multivariate analysis, you get this, hopefully control for maybe 95% of the variability, that if there was improvement that occurred, it wasn't like chance, right? Or we take a look at like a regression discontinuity to determine whether or not schools have made that improvement. With that, understanding that, that'll be very transparent. Schools will have a target, and of course, as we get more data points, we'll be able to project a little bit better. But with that, what we'll be able to do is, to allay some of the concerns some lawmakers have, we'll actually come up with a formula, but we'll have a third party evaluate the statistical process to determine that, right? So some people, when they start hearing statistics, they're like, well, okay, you're going to press the flexible bit. It's not, actually. It's because it becomes very equitable based on where the school starts, where it finishes, and by the way, we'll have a third party review it. As you can imagine, there's millions of dollars on the line when it comes to the exit criteria, this program itself, and also the consequences for the implications, is the word that we got changed, to schools that don't make improvements. If you look at the law, although the state board has not yet taken a critical list of what those implications are, the school does not. Under the law, there may be state receivership. It may be turned over to a charter organization company. It may be closed, depending on your charter school. I mean, serious implications if through the turnaround process it hasn't been successful for some reason, right? So we want to make sure it is very clear and justified and defensible that we have, and I walked up there again, that we have a way of measuring that and reporting whether or not we were successful. So that was big for us. And we already talked a little bit about this, but that second cohort. So cohort 1, cohort 2. Cohort 2 during this year has not formally begun the planning process. So given the fact that we're going back to the, you need 2 years consecutively, this year, this 16-17 school year almost becomes that gap year to where we make up. So there will be a cohort for every year following. It's just as though we didn't have one for this year, per se. And so we'll work on continuing to identify and communicate with schools what that is. For cohort 1, the exit criteria remains the same as it is now in the law, right? So they're in their first year of implementation, second year of turnaround, so they have next year, 17-18, as their final year of implementation, and they'll be evaluated according to the statistical process. Any questions on turnaround?
There was a question online.
Current turnaround schools, that same effect where they're evaluated on this model, not the grade letter change. And you're going to talk about the new accountability system in a moment anyway. So they were identified under one accountability system, got a grade. Last year it changed the scale. And this year it's changed even more so, right? And so this negates all of that. It's irrespective of the accountability system, right? It's points for points. And we can work on those points and see how other schools might comparison. As far as the teacher rewards and incentives, the LEA may still do at the end of the year the rewards for the teachers. Or they may, right now, and we're still working on the details, just passed right last week, they may apply for funds for teacher incentive and recruitment. So for cohort 1 is a little bit different moving forward. And again, that's actually in the explicit language of the law. It's not under the repealed sections, it's actually explicit in the context of the law. Great. If you have any other questions that come up with that or anything else, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Oh, there's one more question.
One more question.
How are cohort 1 schools being evaluated for exit?
Are they being evaluated for exit? It's just that we'll take a look at the statistical, we'll publish a formula we're going to be working on in the next few weeks to determine what that actually looks like, right? Where they're identified. Yes.
Rather than the grade letter change.
Yeah. Rather than the grade letter change, which has changed 3 times since they entered. I don't remember what happened. The measure seems to identify that grade. You see why I get excited? I mean, this was huge. This was good. Yeah, I get excited. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Okay, so finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about, do you want to go down to the, let's see, it's at the very bottom. Keep going.
Is accountability. Oh, wait, that one. Okay.
So I have shared this slide with you before, but I just want to make sure that everybody's clear because I keep getting questions about this because you have heard about new assessments coming and old assessments going away. This year, this is a 3-year look at what we're going to be assessing. So just so that you remember, this year is exactly the same. Stage 3 through 11, ELA literacy, math, and science. 11th grade, the courses are optional based on what your LEA decided, and it will have 2 writing prompts, just like we've had before. And of course, we just finished the ACT. Next year, at the end of 2018, Sage 3 through 8, ELA literacy and math. So it's only 3 through 8 next year. It will have 1 writing prompt at every grade level. Okay? Then we're going to be picking up ACT Aspire, 9th grade, and it has English, math, reading, science, writing. It will be on that great online system that ACT has, but you will have an assessment window. So it will be similar to a SAGE window. You'll have an assessment window. And the writing, let's see, it's between 30 and 75 minutes each subject. And then ACT Aspire 10th grade will be the same way. And then we also do ACT statewide tests next spring. And it's the same exact test, and it will also have a writing prompt. Now, that's quite a big change. And as you can well imagine, ACT is fairly expensive. When we very first did the ACT pilot, I think it was back in 2011. I can't remember. It was something like that. ACT did this great, I don't want to say sales job, but it was like, hey, we'll give you a great discount on the ACT test if you do this. So it was $27 a student. When we went ahead and went statewide, over time, that went from $27 a student to $36 a student, which is, I think, just $1 off what kids have to pay, $1 or $2 from what they have to pay when they do their Saturday assessment. Then we decided, you know, we wanted to keep writing. So writing is an extra $15. So now we've gone from $27 a test to $51 a test for ACT. It's quite expensive. And the ACT Aspire 9th and 10th grade, those are $26 a test per student. So that's around $2.7 million. It's another $800,000 for the ACT. When you compare that to the SAGE test costs around $8 a test. So it's quite a bit more expensive. And so in order to pay for this, so this is like first the good news or the bad news, I'm giving you the bad news first, is you had some UPass money, $1.8 million that LEAs received each year. That money is being sucked into paying for the ACT Aspire test. Plus, we had to ask for a different new appropriation to cover the other $800,000 that we needed for the right piece. So, and we right now have this new RFP that is currently out there for grades 3 through 8 for SAGE. So we don't know what that price tag is going to be. In the beginning, in 2012, the legislature appropriated $6.7 million a year for that. It's never been that. It's been around $10 million a year for SAGE. So, you know, we've had to add extra additional funding sources to that. So I can't imagine the price tag is going to go down, but I also can't imagine that the legislature wants to give us a lot more money for that computer adaptive testing either. So it's this juggling act of how are we going to pay for all of this. So I know that's not what you necessarily came here to wanting to hear today, but I wanted to give you a heads up now so that you knew what was happening. Okay?
For next year.
For next year, right? So some of that, you know, there was some talk about, you know, taking some funding even this year, and, you know, the truth is I didn't take that away from LEAs this year. So, but that was the decision that the board had made with the legislative fiscal analyst as well. So that's how those funding streams actually worked. Question?
What was the process for selecting Aspire 9 and 10?
So the process is in the in SB 220, which is the new accountability law. It says that this particular ACT test or a test that is predictive of performance on the college readiness assessment that's selected. So, I mean, I'm not actually 100% sure that it's ACT Aspire. I mean, we could do an open RFP process for that, but we've got it, you know, I'm assuming because of the way that that language is reading, and we're actually just reaching out to a couple of higher ed folks too to make sure that there's nothing else out there that would do that the same way. Now, and then of course the ACT test is the test that measures, that is most readily accepted by colleges and universities. This is the way that legislation reads. So, you know, I want to be really clear that neither of these assessments are measuring the content, Utah core standards, or the content that is taught in secondary schools. That's not the purpose of these next two assessments. And the reason that that I believe that they've gone to this is they feel like students are more engaged and would be more willing to take an ACT test because, you know, we have these opt-out things and we can't use SAGE in grades and all of that. So, you know, the feet have sort of been taken out from underneath the secondary SAGE last year. Thank you, Erin Osman. And, you know, so this is sort of in response to that. So that, I hope that answers that question. Logan?
Do you have a prediction on a certain percentage of the UPass money that we're losing, or is it all of it?
So Logan's asking what percentage of the UPass funds were passed through, and the total amount was the $1.8 million, and that total amount would be used for ACT Aspire. You'll be receiving no UPass money next year.
Okay, ACT Aspire and 9 and 10 is online.
ACT Aspire, Clyde's asking the question, ACT Aspire 9 and 10 is online, that is correct.
Is there going to be any future mandate for ACT to be online?
Is there going to be any future mandate? I think that will be the last place because of the secure nature and the one-time setting and all of that, that you would have any kind of a mandate around an online ACT. And of course, with some of the things that we heard that have happened, I don't foresee that in the foreseeable future that people would be mandated to do that. All right, so let's talk just a minute about this new accountability legislation. There were two competing bills this session, Senate Bill 220, which is the legislation that passed, and then there was another piece of legislation that got rid of grades completely. And while I think that this is not a complete win, because I know that many of you have had some pushback and you have some feelings about actual letter grades, and we do too, the same kinds of things, but the powers that be have wanted, Senator Niederhauser and the legislature wanted to be able to keep the letter grade designation, but the things that are underneath the letter grade are what's really important to us. And we have a lot of wins because we were able to combine some things that are coming out from ESSA and some other pieces of accountability that we feel would greatly enhance the accountability, the current accountability system. You know, one of the main things that we really wanted to have happen, and that I think there was a lot of momentum behind, is getting rid of four different accountability systems, right? We had Grading Utah Schools, we had SAFAR, which is the federal accountability system, we had the governor's PACE report, we had alternative high school accountability. So we have all these different accountability systems out there, and people are like, which one am I looking at? And if we looked at the hits on the Data Gateway, 10 to 1, the only report that anybody ever looked at was school grading. So, you know, what could we do to really beef up and enhance this particular accountability system and then get rid of everything else? So you probably will still have two ratings, a federal rating and a state rating, that are going to be calculated the exact same way that you got. And the only reason for that is the participation rate. Because under Grading Utah Schools, parents are allowed to opt out. And in the under federal regulations, students are not, we have to test 95% of students. So we still see that little bit of a disconnect, but the accountability that I'm going to talk about is what we're going to be working with. So not only do we have a grade, but now maybe that grade actually means something. And we're going to be going through a process this summer that if you would like to be a part of, we would like you to be a part of it, which is a standard setting process to determine what does an exemplary school look like, and what is that, and talking to lots of different stakeholders, not just assessment directors, but teachers and principals and parents and people from the governor's office and the PTA and local school boards. So bringing a wide swath of people in to do a standard setting to say, you know, and not a normative process, which is what we've had before, but an actual criterion process that says, what is an exemplary school, what is a commendable school, what's a typical school, what's developing, and what do we think a critical needs school looks like. So that's a big win for us that we're able to do that. That work has to be done this summer because we need to report back to the Legislative Interim Committee next fall. So we'll be talking about that. And then,
did I miss one? Or is that?
No, that's right. Okay. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about what the indicators are. So first of all, in grades 3 through 8, you're going to have your overall rating. It will be based on 3 things: achievement, growth, and what we consider an equitable educational opportunity. And that includes 2 things, which is our English language learner growth, and that will only be calculated for schools that have more than 10 or more English language learners. If you have schools, we have about 65% of schools in the state of Utah that have 10 or more students that are English learners. And then in the past, you know, we calculated the below proficient students again, but we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be looking only at the growth of the lowest 25%. When you look at just the below proficient, then you're looking at schools, lots of schools that just have below proficient kids. But if you look at the growth of the lowest 25%, every school has the lowest 25% of students. So it's really a way to look at students who may not be performing as well as the other quartiles. So it's a much more inclusive indicator.
Okay.
Question.
Well,
Yes.
I was going to ask if the English learner growth was only in grades 3 through 8, or will that include first graders, second graders?
It will include all students who are tested with using the WEDAP. Okay.
And implementation of this is when?
The implementation of this is not this, so everything that happens this summer and next fall, that's under the old accountability systems, okay? Then they're going to take a year, and high schools won't have a rating, you know, at the end of 2018 because they won't have the growth because of the new measurements, right? And the board may not have pre-grade schools have a rating, so that's a choice. So it's been in the newspapers that we're going to take a complete holiday, and that's probably what will happen. That is a board decision whether or not to have ratings for grades 3 through 8 next year. So then all of this takes place in the following year, which is 2019. And next year, at the end of 18, we may just report on the indicators. So there may not be like a whole letter grade, but schools may end up getting information about these accountability indicators going forward. Okay? Question?
The growth of the lowest 25% will be based off of that target growth.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Okay? There was a question about the growth, so I'm going to talk about growth in just a minute. Chris?
Yeah, on the English learner growth, did you say earlier you're still working on those metrics?
We're still working on those metrics. So there's been some guidelines that have come out from WIDA about what's appropriate growth for where kids start and where they end. And some of those targets may work, may not work. So we're working through some impact data with our team and then the Center for Assessment and really trying to come up with, based on where you come in at, how old you are, what's an appropriate, measure of growth for a year's worth of growth on that. In high school, you're going to get the overall rating, and I think high school is actually a lot better than what we had before because there's more indicators here. So you're going to have achievement and growth, the equitable educational opportunity, again, which is our English learner growth, and the growth of the lowest 25%. And then there's this fourth piece, and this fourth piece is what we are considering post-secondary readiness. And it's going to include ACT, the graduation rate, and coursework. The ACT is much better in this system. It's for students that get an 18 composite score or better. And if you remember the old system, they had to meet each one of those college benchmarks. And across the state, I think we had about 20% of kids that met all four benchmarks. And so it was a really hard target to meet. So this 18 number is the number that most colleges and universities in the state of Utah accept at their lowest threshold for entrance into college. So that's where we set that. Graduation and coursework. So we're going to talk about each of those separately, just so you understand.
There's a question online.
Question?
How would the new accountability affect high schools with alternative status?
The alternative status for high schools and the alternative accountability system is still in place at this point. The board may choose to take it up. And then in 2019, all schools, so even alternative high schools, so that question will have to be taken up. But right now, they will be included in this accountability system. There's not really a provision for separate accountability for alternative high schools, except for this year and next year. In the legislation, one of the things that we tried to keep out was exact percentages and exact points. That wasn't possible. So when you start to read that, you get really lost. The new law, I don't know if you've looked at it, or the legislation, it's like 1,800 lines long. And so you start getting through all these points and percentages. So I just wanted to create a graphic here that shows what that looks like and make it a little bit easier for you. So this is for grades 3 through 8. It's going to be 150 points, instead of the 600 before, so it's 150. So achievement and growth are both about 37%. The growth of the lowest 25% will count about 17%, and then English learner progress is around 9%. Now, if you do not have enough ELLs, then your total is only 137 points, and then you can see how that breaks out, just those three, okay? And then for high schools, half of the points will be achievement and growth. And then, what happened?
It glitched.
Hold my tongue just right. Then you can see the growth of lowest 25% is with 11%, English learner 6%, ACT 11%, graduation 11%, and readiness 11%, for a total of 225 points, and then 212 if you don't have enough English learners. Okay, so that just so just so that you don't get lost, you can see how those break out. So
there was another question on
yes.
If you don't have enough English learners, do they simply average the other 3 areas instead of 4 total points?
Yeah, have a look at the two circle charts show exactly how those break out. It's fewer points possible. So those points and those percentages drop out. Okay? Now, the indicators are achievement. Now, achievement will be measured by performance on stage, grades 3 through 8, ELA, math, science, and ACT Aspire 9 and 10. So it's the percent proficient, and of course, because we haven't had the test, and ACT Aspire doesn't have proficiency levels per se, so we will wait until the first year of assessment, look at the data, come back and grab a group of you together and do some standard setting around ACT Aspire for us, okay? And then growth. So I'll talk about growth for just a minute. So growth is measured in two ways. First of all, the student's performance is equal to or exceeds the student's academic growth targets. This is what Aaron was talking about this morning. So it's the AGP and the growth as compared to other students with prior assessment scores, similar prior assessment scores, which we know is the SGP. So those two things combined. So let me just tell you really quickly so that, and many of you are familiar with this already. So the student growth percentile quantifies the academic progress of individual students relative to a student's academic peers. And for us right now, that's an SGP of 40, right? And that was set several years ago in the accountability system. There's also, and we've talked about this, but we haven't necessarily used it, which is something we call an AGP. And an AGP is a little bit what Aaron was talking about this morning, but it's the student growth percentile that's needed to attain proficiency within 3 years, so it gives them a target. And if they're already proficient, it tells me what I need to do to maintain that proficiency. And then we're actually going to convert that to a scale score so you can see, so students and parents will be able to see exactly where they are on their scale score and where they need to be. And that's called the student growth target. So that's converted to a scale score on a standardized assessment. Now, one of the things that we did is, people said, let's just look at growth targets. Let's just have that be the only thing we include in accountability. But the problem with that is those AGPs, they act just like a proficiency level. So you're measuring the same thing. And it's much harder for kids that are lower. So that's why we wanted to look at both student growth percentile and AGPs together rather than just using that. Because we want to make sure that each of the indicators on an accountability system measures something different. So you don't want to measure achievement and then measure achievement again, because then it becomes more of a zip code indicator than anything else. So the way this works is we ask ourselves, those things kind of bounce around a little bit. Did the student meet their SGP? Were they 40 or above? If they met their SGP, then we look and give them the growth points. If they were less than 40, they get a 0.25 of a point. And so this is, in the last accountability system, it was either yes or no, 0 or 1. So we wanted to do this along a rubric or a scale so they get partial points, right? Because if you have a 39, you got 0. If you have a 41, you got a whole point. So this is a little more sensitive to growth all along the scale. So 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and 1. Okay, and that's if the student met their target. If they met their target, then we look at their SGP this way. If they didn't meet their target, then they don't get quite as many points. So if they're less than 40, they got 0, and then 25, 0.5, and 0.75, depending upon where their SGP is. So it's a combination of did they meet their target, yes or no, first, and then what was their student growth percentile. So that's how that works for growth. Okay? Any questions on that? I hope that makes sense. Let's see. The other indicators, equitable educational opportunities. So right now, it's calculated again, like I said, for 10 or more English learners. But we're looking at the students based on the progress from year to year of a student's score. And Anne Michelle, I don't know if any of you guys know Anne Michelle, she's new to our department, but she's been at the USOE, and she's worked with WIDA. She's our new accountability specialist, but she'll also be working with WIDA, and she'll be working with the Data and Statistics team in the Center for Assessment on looking at this progress and what that looks like. So welcome, Anne Michelle. And then the growth of the lowest 25% does not use the student growth target, because probably if they're in the lowest 25%, they didn't make their student growth target. So in this case, we're only looking at their SGPs. And their SGPs will be looked at in the same way with anything below 40 is nothing, but then we're going to say 1, 2, 3, and 4 and look at all along the scale, so it's a little more sensitive again to the growth of those students. So excuse me. So you will be using this piece again just for the lowest 25%. Okay? Okay, and then the post-secondary indicators. First of all, I said ACT is the percent of schools, students who receive a composite score of at least an 18 on the ACT. Advanced coursework, so it's the percentage of school students who achieve at least one of the following. They have to have a C or better in an AP course. It's not on the exam, it's just on the course. So we're looking at inclusion here. And then a C or better in a concurrent enrollment class, or a C or better in an IB course, or completion of a CTE pathway. So there's lots of ways kids could count for this. And so what we're wanting to do is making sure that we're including students that have lots of different pathways on their advanced coursework. And then the graduation rate, we're looking at the percent of the schools students who graduate in 4 years. So it's the same federal accountability rules that we used before, the federal 4-year cohort. You could get some bonus points here. So in the past, for grading Utah schools, if a student was a 5th-year student with an IEP, they dropped out of the calculation. But now you can actually get some bonus points for students who graduate in 5 years. So that 5th year, those students, if they graduate, we'll get a few extra bonus points. But what will be published on your report will be the 4-year graduation cohort, so there won't be confusion. It'll just be in the accountability system. Then, one of the things, and we've been working on all of these indicators for quite some time and taking this out to groups and talking to different people. And, there was a great deal of interest in thinking about other indicators other than just assessment indicators or achievement indicators. But some of those can be really corruptible depending upon what happens at a school, and they can also be gained. So we thought, so one of the things we really looked at was what can we just simply report? What can schools focus on that's a good reporting indicator, but it's not necessarily should be counted in accountability? So the legislature came down and said, okay, there's a couple that we really want. We want everybody to report. One of them is the percentage of students who are reading on grade level in grades 1 through 3. So that's going to be on the report card, but it won't be calculated in accountability. The other thing, at the high school level, we want to know the performance on the AP exams. So we don't want to exclude any kids from taking those courses, which could happen if you just counted the pass rates in accountability. But we also think it's important to look at the pass rates for different schools. So that will be reported as well. So that's the performance on the AP exam. Then schools have this great opportunity. They're going to get to report up to 2 self-reported, what we're calling school quality indicators. So there's going to be a great big list of approved, I don't know how big it is, but a list of approved indicators, and then schools will give that information to the state office and through our UTREC system, and we will be able to put this on your accountability reports. So there are some things, it could be process or input indicators. We're thinking about things like, I don't know, chronic absenteeism, or maybe a high school wants to report the percentage of students participating in extracurricular activities. Or maybe a school wants to report the percentage of their teachers that have advanced degrees. I mean, there's lots of different indicators that people have talked about. Climate surveys. So there's lots of different things, and the school would be able to then simply self-report that, and it would be on their report card. Question?
Is there a minimum? Do they have
2. So they can have up to 2. So the one that they have to report is either the AP or the reading on grade level, and then they get up to 2. They can either report 1 or 2 other process indicators or input indicators. Okay? And then just really quickly, So trying to get all of this on a great report that's drillable, that is engaging, that communities can get around, is really something that we wanted to be able to do. So this reporting piece is really important for the state of Utah. So we want a lot of buy-in about this. And so what we're going to do is what we call a design challenge. And this will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And we would like schools, high schools, universities, private contractors, LEAs, anybody that's interested to be a part of this design challenge and help us design what a new report card is going to look like. So we want to make sure that it delivers complex data to a range of end users. It's built on the existing knowledge that we have. We want to encourage end users to have a drill down pieces of it, information. It needs to integrate into our existing platforms and utilizes open source technology to speed the adoption. So if you get online and start going through and looking at all different states and what they report for their report cards, it is soup to nuts. Some of them have a ton of dense information on the front page. Some of them don't have any information on the front page. Most of them have an overall rating. And under the new ESSA regulations, I said, we all had some heartburn about grades. But under the new ESSA regulations, you do have to have an overall rating. So you do see that a lot of states have gone to this. Some states have gone to like a Yelp 1 through 5 stars. Some have gone through different kinds of ratings. But anyway, that's what we have for the reporting and the design challenge. Are there any questions? I know there's going to be tons of questions. I hope I explained that. I hope it makes sense what the new accountability system will look like.
I went quite aware of that. Just if science is going to be in 3 through 8 in 2019.
Yes.
So it's on this line.
So we don't have to necessarily have science, but yes, it will be science. It'll be science, English language arts, math, and science. And of course, science is only 4th grade. It wouldn't be the 3 through 8. So, any other questions? Okay. And that's going to conclude and I appreciate you hanging out with us a little bit longer today. We went a little bit longer. That's going to conclude our assessment director meeting. But before we dismiss, I'd like Julie to come up here for just a minute. It's going to make me cry. Julie's leading us, and she has been at the state office for 11 years, and she has been such an integral part of our section. And I just want everybody to give Julie a great big round of applause. Julie, you've been really interested in some things with her family, and so we're really happy for her, but we're really sad for us. So would you say a couple of IT director made me cry yesterday. Heaven's sakes, you guys have been so kind. She doesn't cry at work. I don't. She doesn't. The people to make other people cry.
The people online are saying no.
So you guys have been super generous to me. And if there's anything I can do for you in the last couple of weeks, I would be so happy to. So let me know what I can do for you before I leave at the end of the month. So thank you. So thank you, and I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.